Welcome. I am so excited to have you upon the 6-month journey of spiritual formation and the 2-year journey of becoming a spiritual director. I am so excited for the times in the future that we will get to share with each other. I remember my own spiritual direction program. I remember the first day that I sat at a table. And I remember who I was 3 years later. That was a 3-year program. And I remember as I look back, the transformation that happened in those 3 years of my life. I learned how to listen to myself. I learned how to discern. I learned so very many things. And it was absolutely an incredible season and journey. Like the walking of a labyrinth, I entered into a space and found my truer center. And then I walked out into the world, back into the world, finding more of who I was, being able to engage with others in the world in ways that I never thought would be possible for me. And so while I look forward to our times together, I also look forward into the future. In your times with yourself, in the moments where you walk a labyrinth, in the moments of your creating your own spiritual autobiography, in the moments when you engage in new practice and take that practice to its outer edges for you. I'm going to open up and share my screen, and we're going to go through some practicals. But before we do, what I want you to do right now is take a moment, bring the soles of your feet to the ground about hips distance apart. Bring some intentionality into your body, lifting through the crown of your head. Close your eyes or leave them open, but take a breath. Maybe you take a couple more. This gets to be about you. I want you to imagine that I have bought you groceries and that I now hand you these groceries and say to you, cook a meal. Right? Whether there's going to be 6, 12, 15, 25, 30 people in our course together, what I want to do is say, I've bought the groceries for a dinner, for a meal. Here they are. And I don't even want 15 variations of the same meal. Amidst the ingredients, I want you to take them and create. And so the way that our program is structured is I'm trusting in adult learning. And what that means is that even in the presentation of a syllabus and saying, hey, try this practice on for a month. And for the first year, I want you to try practice on once every month. So you're going to spend a month with a practice. In that, you get to decide what that looks like. I'm going to introduce you to spiritual autobiography writing, recording, and I'm going to introduce you to walking a labyrinth. Those two practices, more than any of the others, are going to be what follows us through the curriculum of the next 2 years. But how you choose to engage with each of those gets to be your decision. Perhaps you're the kind of person who wants to say, you know what, for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 3 to 5 times a week, I'm going to spend on my spiritual autobiography. Maybe you're the person that says, you know what, once a month, I'm going to set aside an hour to 3 hours, maybe a whole morning, and I'm going to work on my spiritual autobiography. And maybe you fall in love with all the ways you can write a spiritual autobiography and say, oh my goodness, this practice is going to follow me around for the rest of my life. I'm going to do something with the spiritual autobiography once a month, once every other week, once a week, a few times a week. You get to decide that. There is no exam. There are no official book reports. There will be questions. There will be integrations. What do I mean by integrations? One of the requirements of this program is going to be teaching the Ignatian Examen along with other methods in regards to that. But what is that? At the end of the day, review the day. Maybe you write some notes, maybe you take a picture to summarize the day. Maybe you just take a deep breath and be like, I'm so glad that day is over. That can be your Examen. There might be some Ignatian practitioners who are like, but you get to make it your own. That is this program, because the fact of the matter is, in the 25 years plus that I have sat as a spiritual director, I have witnessed hundreds of people, and they're all different. And they all come to spirituality, even if it's of the same faith tradition, differently. And learning to have lenses that can sit with whosoever. And break down bias and personal preference so that you can hold space for somebody else's preferences. I have a favorite saying, you will hear me say it a lot, that gets to be here too. But so adult learning says, here's the material. Take with it and use it as you will. Integration, besides being daily, can be weekly, right? And whether it's on a Friday or Saturday or Sunday, or what if you integrate Monday to Monday? That gets to be here too, right? And however you do it, perhaps you're a pen and paper girl or boy and man, woman, and you want to write it out. Perhaps you're more with your computer or your iPad and you're going to type it out. Perhaps you're more into photography and imagery and visual spaces. Maybe you take a picture every day. And at the end of the week, you create a collage around that. That gets to be here too, right? Maybe you're a painter, an artist. Maybe you make a clay creation, or maybe you paint a painting. Maybe that's your integration. Because we're going to do it daily, weekly, and monthly. And then even in segments of 3 months, 6 months, a year, to just hold space for recalling, recollection, integration, discernment. What patterns are you seeing in yourself and others in the world? How will that then affect your own formation and going forward? Right? All of those questions. And so while there will be assignments like that, how it comes forward really gets to be about you. And maybe one day you write in your journal and another day you take a picture. All of it belongs. All of it belongs, because at the end of the day, the question of what is forming in you, that is the question. And what does that look like? And what is going to be forming one day in your clients? And what can you see for them down the road? And what do they want to see, which is even more important, for themselves down the road? Again, let's take another breath. You might have a bunch of questions at this point. Write them down. There will be a place where you can email them to me, and we can open up discussion amidst yourselves too. I love Thinkific. It has platforms for community and for discussion and for groups, and we'll get into all of that as well. Let me give you a first look into the curriculum. This is how the curriculum looks in September of 2020. So if you're in the future and it doesn't look this way, or it's been adjusted a little bit, my heartbeat is that the principles will always be the same. Maybe there'll be a new video at that time, maybe not. But let's get started. Gonna see me share my screen here. And I'm gonna pull this up. Here we are in Thinkific. All right, the course that we're talking about is this, the practitioner's journey, stepping into formation. See, before we can even begin to talk about, I'm gonna just pull this up here, before we can even begin to talk about becoming a spiritual director, it gets to be about you. What is forming in you? This is the welcoming. So what you'll see to the side of the screen is these first 3 things. Welcome to the course, introduction to formation, and being in the practices. We'll talk in a moment about everything underneath those. But these 3 things, welcome to the course, introduction to formation, and being in the practices, is what I want to focus on. In Welcome to the Course, you're going to see this screen right here, this hello and welcome. There'll be a video of me welcoming you even further, a video of Thinkific, a tutorial. I think it's a great tutorial. I couldn't do it any better. I'm not gonna have to recreate the wheel. I'm gonna use theirs. Here is the space for application and interview. If you have not filled out an application, just do so. Even if you and I have had a conversation and you're accepted into the program, fill out this application. It just gives me the information to have, so that some questions are like, what do you hope to get out of this program? And where's your spiritual journey been? Those are just good things to have taken place. Some of you have had an interview before you've done that. If you have not had an interview yet, push right there, schedule your interview, and you and I will have a 30-minute time together talking about the program and your intentions and what you hope to get out of it. Right now, in course overview, right now that page is linked to my website, ldmiller.com, but when you're looking at it, it actually will have this video with other supporting materials. And so it will not be this screen. This screen is a placeholder. And then there's a survey. Again, somewhat like the application, the survey is, and some of the questions you can skip if you don't want to answer them. There are a couple of questions that I want the answers for, such as one is, what might be something that's difficult for you in this course? And maybe it's finding the time. You know what, when I put this survey together, I went through it and answered it myself, and creating this course has definitely bridged the gap in my technological knowledge. And so my learning curve has been at an almost 90-degree angle. That has been some of my things in this. And so just filling out the survey will be really helpful. That's the Welcome to the Course. Introduction to Formation. It has a 30-minute video that goes through some of the curriculum. It goes through what to be expecting. And then there's some more videos and things that you can expect. Go through all of those. And then being in the practices. This is where I wanted to get to. So in being in the practices, right here, right within the course, whoops, it's a video, but it's going and I want it to stop. There's going to be material right here, the writing of a spiritual autobiography. And you can do this alone, or now for those of you enrolled in the 6-month spiritual formation program, something that you might, let me see, go back to here. Nope. This is where my technology spaces are definitely a little bit challenged. That is not where I want to be. So let's see here. This is where we'll go. It's all grace. Here we go. Creating your own spiritual autobiography, right? Within the practitioner's journey, it's a snippet. Here is a whole course. In the course of the 2 years, this is where I want you to go. This is where I want you to go. So yes, creating your spiritual autobiography needs to be a part of your program. And this course is right there for you. As a student, you get a discount on that. For the first cohort, you get special accommodations for it. But this is where you're going to find the matching place that's in the spiritual formation. Right here, being in the practices. The writing of spiritual autobiography, even within that curriculum, it will say, hop off, go check out that other program. Same with Labyrinth, Pathways of Preparation and Mystery. Again, there'll be a snippet here, and as you saw, see, I do know my way around this, I just sometimes forget. Here is its own standalone course, the Labyrinth, Pathways of Preparation. And yeah, and so you'll have that at your experience as well. Going forward, there'll be a little course, a little snippet on journaling, and then let's get down to the practices. So these 4 practices, these 4 segments and categories are going to introduce you to some ways of being. The first one, as you can read, is about breath, body, and being. And there's going to be movement, and there's going to be breath exercises and mindfulness and being with yourself in the moment or other in those spaces. Yes, for those of you that know me, you know I'm a yoga therapist and a 500-hour therapeutic yoga specialist / instructor. For me, when I see body, I do think yoga, but really what I think is movement and accessibility. Accessibility. What do I mean by that? For some people who have known trauma, inhabiting their body is like looking at a house on fire and there's no way you want to be in that house. These are the practices, whether that's your reality or perhaps potentially one day your client's reality. These are the practices that help empower us to learn how to be in our physical container and in taking deeper breaths and in being present to ourselves and to others. What I want to say is, not too long ago for the Listening Project, I got to interview this amazing, amazing woman. Her name is Jody Patterson. She is a human rights advocate for the transgender populations. And she has a son, Penelope, who is transgender. She also has a son who doesn't believe transgender exists. And they all live in the same household. She created this incredible thing called The Lab, and that's how their family negotiates conversations and discussions around those hot topics. Because you know what, at the end of the day, that family really loves one another. And it's an amazing interview. I'll give you access to it. She's an amazing person. She's written a couple books. You can check her out. Her name is Jody Patterson. But the reason I bring her up in this space, talking about the body, is that when she and I talked, she talked about running. She's not a yogi, she's a runner. And she broke her run down into 3 parts. And what I loved about it was that first part is her just getting going. It's warming up, it's waking up the body. Her second part, she's finding her stride. What I loved about the way she described her third part is it's very likened to the yogic samadhi, shavasana type place, the charismatic Christians being in the spirit place, just that place of tranquility, of bliss, right? Whatever language is around there for you. She talked about that third part of her run as being that. If for you, that's walking in the woods, hiking, bouldering, rock climbing, riding a bike, riding a horse, whatever that means for you, yes, there will be exercises in that of movement and some yoga influence. That truly what it is about finding you in your own body and what resonates with your being, because that's what you need to be able to access for your clients. And first and foremost for yourself. And so these practices will say, what is your relationship with your body? What would it be like to befriend your body? And in Living Mongoliso, we have a favorite saying of mine. It's acquaint yourself with yourself as you are and how you are in your physical body, right? And so that is what these practices are going to be. We're going to skip number 2 for a moment and go to introduction into discernment. I would say that in this age and time that we are living in, that there are skills that are pertinent, and it's so important for all of us to gravitate towards. They are listening, discerning, wisdom practices. And so here in this place, we will talk about discernment and ways to grow into discernment, ways to find that for yourself, suggestions that you can give to your clients, and all of that kind of good stuff. Here in practices 4, wisdom, intention, and examine. This is some of my personal favorites. Intention and examine are my bookends to a day and a night. What do I mean by that? When I'm going to sleep, I do, whether I come up with an answer or not, I ask myself, what do I intend to do tomorrow? And that's not just a to-do list. It's how do I intend to live tomorrow as a day? Who do I want to be? And set that intention in my heart. The examine is at night after the day has been lived, right? And you recall, you turn around and you look back. When did I live in a space that, wow, that is the me that I want to present into the world? when did I live in the space that, oh my goodness, that's not me, and I understand why I behaved that way. XYZ is maybe the reason why I reacted and didn't respond in the choices I would have rathered. And this is maybe what I'm going to do about it. Or what could I have done differently to support myself in the space of making a different decision? So intention and examine and wisdom practices are about living an intentional life and being intentional with ourselves in those spaces. Let's go back up to number 2. Possibilities of spiritual growth and development. So as part of our program it is a 2-year program. For year 1, in this space, there's going to be about 24 to 36 possibilities of spiritual practices, disciplines. I want you to pick 12. And for each month, I want you to acquaint yourself intimately with that practice. How? You get to decide that, and we'll talk more about that in that segment. Second year, for the first 3 months, I want you to pick a practice. It can be one that you really enjoyed in the first year. It might be one that you really bumped up against and hated. I challenge you to not just gravitate to the practices that you would gravitate to, but challenge yourself to maybe even sit with one that isn't your forte, but be with it and let it educate you and be educated by it. But so in second year, you're going to pick one. It could be one you did in the first 12 months, or it could be something different. Pick one and stay with it for 3 months. In the next 3 months, again, pick a different practice and stay with that for 3 months. Then for the last 6 months of our program, you got it. I'm going to ask you to take one of the exercises, one of the possibilities of disciplines, and I'm going to ask you to stay with it for 6 months. Why? I love the saying, staying with something past the point of boredom. Sometimes I've stayed with the same yoga practice. Maybe it's a video, maybe it's an audio to somebody teaching, but I've stayed with the same sequence for 6 months to a year. And it's like, what? Don't you get tired of it? No, because every day that I show up to it, I'm different. The day is different. So yes, the practice is the same, but how that practice is meeting my body is different. And we get bored. We might wonder what it is that we're missing out on. And so we might then say like, I want something different. But I'm going to challenge you in the last 6 months of our program to pick one of the disciplines, one of the spiritual practices, and stay with it for those 6 months. All right. These are the 3 things that are going to stay with us. Well, not the 3. These 2 things, introduction to formation, some components of that, and being in the practices definitely are going to be with us for the next 2 years. What are the first 6 months going to look like? Great question. Here we go. In January, we're going to start with, through the questions, what is spirituality? What is religion? It's going to be some readings and some like exercises and some journaling prompts right in through here. Then in February, through the body, listening to myself and others. Again, if some of you have been in a yoga therapy session with me, this maybe you have at least a framework for it. I suggest if you haven't been in a yoga therapy session with me or another yoga therapist trained by Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy, I suggest that you get that into just even a once experience, because what this is learning how to listen to your body and learning how to listen to the bodies around you. Why is that important? Somebody's words might be saying one thing and their body language or their demeanor or even their energy is saying a completely other thing. Learning how to recognize that in yourself, the lack of congruency, learning how to trust your intuition, that gut feeling, something is off here, helps you be able to sit with yourself and others. I'm going to tell you a story here. Once I was invited down into Atlanta to speak at a conference. There was a guest from South America who the people running the conference wanted me to talk to. I'm very intuitive. In Christian circles, they call it revelatory/prophetic. I don't necessarily gravitate to that language, but that's what that was. And so the guy wanted to pick my brain just about what I knew and ask me a ton of questions. And so I was sitting, and they had set up this lunch that he and I were going to sit across from each other and have this dialogue. Those are the expectations. I sat across from him and I saw him, and in my gut, so it wasn't even anything I saw visually, it wasn't even in his physicality or his demeanor. What it ended up being was my intuition in my gut. But I felt that in my body. When I looked at him, all I could think about was that he wants to kill himself. And what I ended up doing was, here, he wanted to pick my brain, right, about revelation and knowings that happen, whatever that language is for you. And I looked at him and I was like, beyond us talking about anything, I just want to create some space for you about, would you want to tell me why you want to take your life? There. He wanted to pick my brain and he got a demonstration of it. And it was really profound for him and really life-changing, because the fact of the matter is, when we know how to learn to listen through our bodies to ourselves, right? I trusted that gut. So how do we learn that, right? And that's learning to listen to those sensations and being familiar and befriending our bodies. Like I said earlier, this is not necessarily an easy task. Now, a couple of times you have heard me say, whatever your language is here, you're going to see a slide that talks about this very thing, right? So my foundation in my family of origin was, I was born and raised to a Jewish family. And in my early years, we were very conservative, which meant we sat at a temple that the men sat on one side and the women and children sat on the other. And if you wanted to sit together, you sat in the way, way back outside of the main temple space. So for me, like, I close my eyes, I hear a shofar. I close my eyes, I see imagery of a Torah being brought around the temple and men taking their prayer shawls and touching the Torah and touching it to their lips and kissing it. Those are the things that are ingrained in my body. Then at 19, I had an experience that introduced me to the Christ, to Jesus, and to Christianity. And I lived in that realm from 19 to formally for about 25 years, where I was actually in full-time ministry and charismatic evangelicalism, and worked in churches and in parachurch organizations. And so my language was very Christian. I did, even in those days, talk about losing Christianese, right? How do we take language and make it more expansive and inclusive? And that's what I'm talking about here. Now I would call myself a contemplative, and I see so much similarities in all the faith traditions and in all the important aspects of living life as a human being. I do still relegate what I would say is that in times I would be a Christian contemplative or mystical person, but my language is intentionally expansive and inclusive. So there are times through this course where you will hear me say God. There are times through this course you might even hear me say Jesus. That is a personal belief of mine. There are times I might talk about it in energy, or the universe, or source, or divine nature, or the divine essence, or the divine entity. To me, they all speak of the same thing. What's your language, right? And learning to listen to what's important to you, that gets to be here too. And the fact of the matter is that this course, and maybe this is your decision point, this course is not specifically a Christian spiritual direction formation program. Do I consider myself a Christian? I consider myself a contemplative Christian that has a lot of spaces for Buddhism and a lot of spaces for practices of yoga and other philosophies, and I'm influenced by wisdom traditions across the centuries. Do I believe in Jesus? Yes, I believe in Jesus. And for me, it's a very expansive personal belief. But I will say the name of Jesus if what's important to you is that the whole program is focused around Christian literature, Christian doctrine, Christian expression, then you know what? This program isn't for you. And that gets to be here too. And I'm glad that you found that out here and not 6 months from now. And so you get to consider that. It doesn't really belong in the conversation of Through the Body, listening to myself and others, but I recognize that I had said it a couple of times, and I figured, let's travel down this rabbit trail for a couple of minutes. Let's come back through the natural world, listening to myself in nature. One of the book recommendations here will be into getting into the hidden life of trees, or a book about trees, or Celtic practices, or learning about creation in the natural world in a way that it speaks. I live in Blacksburg, Virginia, and there is a tree outside of this park, outside of the police station. And that tree feels like, I call him my grandfather tree, and he has taught me so much wisdom. And I put my hands on him, and I feel the wisdom that reverberates in and through him. And that is a core belief in my life, that the natural world speaks and teaches me about myself. I walk barefoot upon the earth because that is a practice that is important to me. I love the book Braiding Sweetgrass because, again, it orients me to Mother Earth and to the tenderness of her caring for me as I would care for her. And so take that and parse that out. Part of the adult learning situation is you might disagree with me on some points. That's okay. We do not have to be on the same page for everything. What does looking at the natural world mean to you? Maybe you're standing at some vista, be it ocean or mountain or something in between, and you're struck in the core of you about the immensity and beauty of God. Fabulous. Fabulous. That's your experience. It's your expression. What I hope is to open us up to expansive expressions, because unless you're only going to see clients of one faith tradition, and even within one faith tradition, believe me, the varieties of people that will step through your door and sit across from you, it's good to at least have a paradigm and a perspective that allows and opens for all things. Right, so next, through breath, meditation, intention, integration, mystery, and mystic. We will talk about the mystics of old. We will talk about the breath. In Hebrew culture, in the language, there's a word called ruha, which means life force, spirit, right? And I love that. And we'll learn some meditation techniques. We'll learn about setting intentions, how to integrate, again, that is intention and examine. And how do we do that? Through the mind and emotions, the convergence of spirituality and psychology. Learning that we as a person have spirit beings, mental bodies, and emotional spaces, a physical body, higher wisdom places, right? Energy about us. What are all those different layers? And as a spiritual director in training, the fact of the matter is, unless you are also a licensed mental health practitioner, you are not. If you're only a spiritual director, or if your profession is spiritual direction, right, then you need to know how to stay in your lane. And we'll talk about this in this part, and we'll talk about it much more in depth, in detail in the 2 years to come. We'll talk about working alongside practitioners, right? When do you need to be able to refer a client out to get some extra help? And how do you do that? And how do you walk as a spiritual being and have the psychology of a human being, and all of that being in the same person? And we will talk about the mind and emotions and being present to those. We will conclude the 6-month of formation process through the passage of time, rhythm, and meaning, knowing yourself deeply. We'll get into metaphors here, as well as, like I said, time and rhythm, patterns of behavior, the passage of time, what season someone is in, looking at it literally and metaphorically, and really diving more deeply into knowing yourself through those strategies and paradigms. So these are the next 6 months. This is the practitioner's journey. These will can figure out the technology, which by the time you're watching this video, I will. These will be released month to month. So you will have access always to these 3 up top. Obviously, welcome to the course, Introduction to Formation and Being in the Practices. Those you will have access to immediately as you sign up. Come in the month before we begin the program. So if you're starting in January, you'll get access in December. If you're starting in June, you'll get access in May, to this section, and so on and so forth through all the sections, getting access to it the month before. That might change. So if you look at your screen and you have access to all of them, then you have access to all of them. But you know what? It's a lot of material. And truly, I want you to camp out in the formation places and in the practices. I want you to expose yourself to the videos here. Maybe watch them more than once. I want you to be in the practices and really allow them to influence you in your days. And so yes, all the material through here is what we will cover when we come together monthly, and it's important to have touched it prior, but this is about you. This gets to be about you and for you. I am all over the place with my little pointer, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I want to talk about one more thing. So you saw the labyrinth, right? There will be the information about the labyrinth locator. You can go on there and see and find a labyrinth that you could walk. If that is not part of your journey, there are handheld ones. You can grab some clay and even make one for yourself. All of that is in links in the course, but I also wanted to talk about printed off labyrinths, and the link for this will be here too. So one of my personal practices that I'm doing for 30 days is the writing of a labyrinth page. This was day 1, and the season of autumn and change was really upon me. And so you can see I took different colors of pens, and yellow and orange and red. And when I step into journaling into a labyrinth page, I do it stream of conscious, and I just write and write and write until it's done. And most of them I do in one sitting, but we'll get to that as well. After that, after it's done, I take a few moments, and on the back, I integrate it, right? So when I'm writing this, I'm just letting stream of consciousness and flow happen. Afterwards, I take a few breaths, right? Put my feet on the floor. I center myself, whatever that looks like for you in your practices. And I review what I wrote. I'm like, what did I learn there? And I integrate it on the back. That was day 1. Day 2 felt winter, right? I woke up and a lot felt really cold inside of me, and I was in touch with some things personally. And so I chose grays and blues. But you know what? Even amidst any season, there's going to be something tangible of a different sensation, a different space. And so I brought some green, because even amidst winter months or winter sensation in my body, there is new growth and there is light and hope, right? Even in a dark winter space, right? There are other spaces present. And so I put day 2 up here in the corner, and I did my thing and I integrated. And that was day 2. Day 3 started, and for the most part, as you can see, there's an entrance in the middle, and with labyrinths, you come in and you go around, you get to the center, and then you come out. But for the first 2, I started on the right here, and I started to write and then head into the center. When it came to day 3, there was a lot going on. Day 3, I really wanted to start in the middle. And so I let myself do that. That is the crux of this program. Yes, there are things that I'm going to say, this is what I want you to do. And we are formed in an adult learning situation. We are formed in an adult learning situation. So you get to make the decisions. The right way to do something, very rarely is there one right way to do something. So while I had started at the entrance/exit in all the others, this time I started in the center. And what I knew is, as I started in the center, what I knew I wanted to do was I wanted to start in the center and go out, but then I wanted to come back into center. So much of the spiritual formation journey, right, is that journey inward and that journey back out into the world. That journey inward and finding that sense of self, and that journey of going back into the world. So what you see here is I did start in the center, but I wrote really small. Because for me, it's the process that's happening in the moment. I don't believe in myself that I'm going to come back and want to read every single word. I'm letting, for this, for me, I'm letting it be the experience. What I'll always be able to read is the integration on the back. I might not be able to always read every word that's written on the page. If that's important to you, then it's important to you and you honor your own experience. There are lots of different versions. I love the Chart Labyrinth. It's my favorite. There are a couple other templates that are available online, and I will give those to you as well. But what you can see is I created enough space, and I'll use a different colored pen probably or something to delineate the path going out from center to the path going from out back in. What does a blank template look like, or the Chart Labyrinth? Pull one out for you, and this is what the Chart Labyrinth template looks like. But did you see this incomplete one? Yes, you did. So the first two that I showed you, I did those in one sitting. This one felt really important to me. So you notice, like on day 3, it was September 23rd, 2020. September 24th, I did not get to this. So yes, you heard me say that I said I was going to do a labyrinth journaling process for 30 days. I didn't do it on September 24th. So many of us who maybe have some religious formation in specific traditions say, well, if you're going to do it, you messed it up. You blew it, right? No, you didn't blow anything. You didn't blow anything. So what did I do? Today, on September 25th, I said, today is day 4. Yesterday wasn't day 4 because I missed it. Yesterday, life happened and I didn't come to it. This morning, I came to it for the 4th day. I will do 30 days of experiencing with labyrinth journaling. It might not be 30 consecutive days. And that gets to be here too. That gets to be here too. All right, that's been a lot, but I am so excited to start this journey with you. I believe in formation practices. I believe in learning how to find congruency within us so that our lives out in the world mirror our inner life. I used to feel like a sieve, that things flowed in me and out of me, and there wasn't the interior construction that could hold it. So I felt like I needed scaffolding around me so that I could have formed spaces. For me, that is the paradigm now that I do look at, the 25 years that I spent in a very specific religious formative practice, was I needed that scaffolding. There are a couple really great books, and I will end this video, but one gentleman by the name of James Fowler talks about, he overlays Erik Erikson's Stages of Human Development with spirituality, and he talks about the 2 to 4-year-old needing more structure. And so it's usually the person who does love that structure that he acquaints with that need of a 2 to a 4-year-old to have that specific structure. And truly for me, that's where I camped out for 25 years of my life. I don't feel like it diminishes me to say that, I had the mentality of a 2 to 4-year-old. For some people who did, there was this other book called Faith Styles that looked at that work and said that can be a little offensive to some people who do gravitate to a more traditional way of believing. And so he came out with a book called Faith Styles that talks about the different way believers believe, from traditional to eclectic and everything in between. But all of that to say, wherever you are in your faith journey, whether you adhere to a specific tradition or not, whether you're deconstructing a journey that you had, wherever you are, whatever that looks like for you, this 6 months of formation, let's say you're not even interested in being a spiritual director, but the 6 months of formation is going to be an incredible program of transformation and looking at questions. Like Rilke says, it's about living the question. What questions are reverberating within you like a ping pong ball, hitting things, triggering things, setting things off that you would like to have resolution to? That's what these 6 months are going to be. So whether it is a commitment and you're all into the 2 years of spiritual direction training, or you're looking at something in the 6-month formation course really resonated with me, I'm going to just start there. Get in touch with me, and we will definitely have that conversation. I look forward to being with you, and take care.